Welcome! My name is Jasom Jensai. Hello there to Star Wars Duels. This episode is Anakin Skywalker versus Darth Vader. Specifically, Anakin from the end of the Clone Wars versus Vader from the end of the Galactic Civil War. If you've never seen one of my Star Wars duels, this is how it is going to work. I will start by analyzing each combatant's physical abilities, then I'll discuss their force powers. After that, I'll go over their tactics and style. Finally, I'll describe a potential duel scenario between the two characters. The battlefield for that duel will be the Agni Kai Arena from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Awesome show, by the way. Anakin Skywalker was a Jedi Knight during the time of the Clone Wars. He was renowned for his bold and powerful tactics among his colleagues. But at the end of the war, he turned to the dark side and claimed a new name for himself, Darth Vader. In a climactic battle with his old master, Obi-Wan Kenobi, he was dismembered and burned on the lava planet of Mustafar. Over the years, the suit his injuries forced him to wear, the cruelty of his Sith master, and his own self-hatred transformed him into a completely different character. Although he lost much of his power on Mustafar, he gained much of it back through focus, discipline, and pure rage. With all that, let's discuss Anakin Skywalker versus Darth Vader. Anakin is an accomplished duelist. Throughout the Clone Wars, his skills have increased dramatically. By the end of the war, he was strong enough to defeat Dooku. Strength is the key word here. Anakin fights with Form 5, a form that emphasizes strength and stability. In his first duel, Dooku seems to be mostly toying with him, as seen by how easily he slices Anakin's second lightsaber. It is far easier to hit a hand or an arm than to hit a hilt. However, Anakin continually pushes Dooku harder as the war drags on. In their duel on Tatooine, Anakin almost seems to go toe-to-toe with Dooku. However, in this fight, Dooku seems to be using a less elegant style, more like Form 5, and he's constantly taunting Anakin. All this leads me to believe that he is not really going 100%. Regardless, it is clear that Anakin has one advantage, his strength. He just needs to learn to leverage it. There are two notable moments in this fight. The first one is here, when Anakin is matching Dooku's strength from a severely disadvantaged position. He has gravity against him, he's using one hand, and he is blocking with the middle of his blade, while Dooku is pressing with the strong of his blade, or the part that's closest to the hilt. It's basic lever physics. The second one is here, where Anakin lands a solid kick to Dooku. Although Dooku had mostly let down his guard, it still shows improvement from his first duel. His third duel with Dooku comes much later, and we can see a ton of improvement. Dooku seems to be going 100% in this duel for the beginning, but Anakin still managed to get him in the bind, which is a very favorable position for Form 5 users because of their strength, and disfavorable for Form 2 users like Dooku because of their relative weakness. However, instead of opting to use his lightsaber skills to escape, Dooku uses the Force to force Anakin on an offensive, and then he orders 4 Magna Guards to attack. Dooku calmly walks away, but Anakin manages to fight off the Magna Guards and get close to Dooku. Dooku avoids 2 attacks before being forced to ignite his lightsaber. You can even see a bit of surprise on Dooku's face right before the Magna Guards attack. Although Anakin clearly loses this fight, it was a 5-1 odds, and not even Mando likes those odds. The next fight comes soon after, on Naboo again. Though this time it is in a palace, instead of wherever this is, some evil separatist cave or something. Can I just say, this fight is awesome for more than just its choreography. Palpatine's satisfied smiles as he watches Anakin are a brilliant touch. The dark hallways and the glowing lightsabers and the yellow Magna Guards are also pretty cool. Lastly, the fact that it's a duel on Naboo, which is so significant to Anakin and Palpatine, is cool. Even Dooku has a connection to Naboo because of the sight of Qui-Gon's death, which would have solidified his choice to embrace the dark side. Anyways, on with the analysis. The fight starts out with the Magna Guard stabbing Anakin with an electro staff. Unlike in the previous duel, this does not really faze him. He then defeats the Magna Guard in 2 quick strikes. The second Magna Guard does a bit better, but he catches its fist and shoves it back before slicing it to pieces. As he engages with Dooku, a third Magna Guard grabs the Chancellor. Dooku holds him off with the Force, letting Anakin display his strength as he nearly physically shoves past Dooku's Force push. Anakin quickly shoves Dooku back. Unlike in their earlier duels, his greater strength is becoming a difficult problem for Dooku. Their duel culminates with Anakin kicking the Count to the ground, nearly battering away his guard, and grabbing his throat, before Dooku uses Force Lightning and telekinesis to take Skywalker out. At this point, Anakin has surpassed Dooku in lightsaber dueling, but not to the point where Dooku does not have time to utilize his Force powers. Their next duel comes on Obadiah, as Anakin and Obi-Wan are investigating the death of Sifo Dyas and the origins of the Clone Army. Before Dooku can escape, the Jedi attack. Dooku backpedals quickly and expertly avoids fighting them both at the same time, with amazing footwork. This is definitely one of Dooku's best displays. I mean, watch him literally throw that headlock. Absolutely brilliant. Best headlock I've ever seen. Anakin plays very defensively, and although with Kenobi's help he puts too much pressure on Dooku for force powers, Dooku still scores several amazing physical strikes, like that awesome headlock. And then there's that escape. With Kenobi's help, Anakin manages to jump onto the ship, but Dooku calmly avoids Anakin's attacks, demonstrating the weaknesses of Form 5, its predictability and lack of speed. Again, this is one of Dooku's most impressive duels. The next duel does not go quite as well for Dooku. It starts with an excellent barrage of tag team attacks from Anakin and Kenobi. Dooku barely survives, but then after another series of attacks, he manages to split them up with a force push. While Kenobi deals with a pair of super battle droids, Anakin pushes Dooku up the staircase. They meet at the top, and Dooku does this weird thing where he kicks Anakin like a ballet dancer while simultaneously force choking Kenobi. While this maneuver isn't impossible, it doesn't seem like Dooku would be able to pull it off on Kenobi and Anakin, who are both talented duelists in their own right. One explanation is that Palpatine interfered in order to have Kenobi be taken out, so Anakin could duel Dooku alone, and so Anakin could kill him and get more to the dark side. There's even a shot right before this happens of Palpatine saying, "Yeah." Regardless of how it happened, Anakin finds himself alone against Dooku. Anakin immediately lands a kick on Dooku, knocking him off the balcony. He follows it up with a hard-hitting strikes that put Dooku on the defensive. They duel for a bit, and it's clear that Anakin has become a lot stronger. But suddenly, Anakin grabs Dooku's arms and twists his lightsaber around in a quick maneuver that slices off both of Dooku's hands. It all happens so fast that Dooku has shock clearly written all his face. He's so surprised that he doesn't even scream in pain. Throughout their duels, Anakin's biggest advantage was his strength, but his victory finally came through his speed and his skill. If you're enjoying the analysis, hit the like button. Do it. There is also a duel between Anakin and Hondo Ohnaka of all people. It is pretty early in the war. Hondo is better than you would think. He has a very intelligent Kowakian monkey lizard helping him, and most of the duel is just Hondo barely surviving. And that's all the excuses I can make for him. It is similar to Boba's feats in Episode 6. It kinda just doesn't really mesh well with the rest of his fights, because Anakin just should have been able to take out Hondo super easily. Another interesting fight is Anakin versus an assassin droid. This happens in the Clone Wars Season 1, Episode 22, when Cad Bane and several bounty hunters attempt to kidnap a group of senators on Coruscant. Anakin finds himself without a lightsaber and hunted by a weak way in an IG unit. He gets them alone and beats the IG unit with his bare hands. The IG unit is strong enough to bend its own rifle. He also has a duel with Ventress. Ventress is a quick fighter. She has 2 blades, excellent acrobatics, and deadly precision. But Anakin is fast enough to keep up with her, and he has his significant strength advantage, which he leverages to great effect. In their duel on Kamino, the only significant hits Ventress had was at the beginning when she launched a quick force push, and at the end when Anakin was going one-handed because he was grabbing the clone thing. For the rest of the time that we see, she is retreating. In conclusion, by the time the Clone Wars comes to an end, Anakin is strong enough to beat up an IG unit barehanded, and put most opponents on the defensive with just a few strikes. He is fast enough to keep up with Ventress and to outpace Dooku. He is skilled enough to slice off Dooku's hands, and he is tough enough to shrug off an electro staff. Vader is like Anakin in many ways. He is stronger, tougher, and more skilled. However, his speed was diminished greatly because of his suit. He is able to effortlessly duel even competent Form 5 users with a single hand. He knocks over and disarms Luke like a child. However, a few times Luke's speed briefly gets the best of Vader. In the end, Luke strikes Vader in the shoulder. Okay, hang on. I gotta point out real quick that Vader can literally tank lightsaber strikes to his shoulder. Anyway, Luke strikes Vader in the shoulder, and immediately, as if he had been holding back before, Vader slices off Luke's hand. In his duel with Canon and Ezra, he makes them look like children. Though, to be honest, Ezra's a child anyway, so I guess that's not that surprising. He throws them several meters a few times. Each of their strikes is completely stonewalled. As they are fleeing, Sabine shoots 2 blaster bolts at him. Before she can get off a third, the first one slams right back into her, and the second one comes soon after. The next time they encounter Vader, they fare no better. However, that time, Ahsoka was there. So we get to see Ahsoka versus Vader. It's an incredible duel for many reasons, but one of the reasons I like it personally is because it demonstrates that Vader can keep up with fast opponents. Before this fight, Vader had not dueled anybody who was focused on their speed, and his slow, powerful movements seemed easy to outflank to some people. However, Ahsoka's speed does not save her. Vader is able to leverage his superior strength, a lesson he learned through his many duels with Dooku. Strength is nothing if you cannot pin down your opponent, but Vader is an expert at pinning down his opponent despite his lack of speed. Vader does this through a combination of telekinesis, positioning, and reflexes. Telekinesis, I'll cover a bit later. Vader almost always keeps his blade right in front of him, ready to move, and he uses lots of wrist movements to defend himself. His wrists were not slowed much by his suit, as we see when he slaughters the rebel scum over Scarif. Vader also has incredible reflexes. Anakin also has quick reflexes. They're technically the same person after all, and their reflexes didn't really change that much when Vader got burned. The first thing Qui-Gon verbally notes about Anakin when he meets him is that he must have Jedi reflexes. These reflexes allow Vader and Anakin to be incredible pilots. Vader demonstrates this skill when he takes on a Phoenix Squadron. Yes, the entire thing. And yes, by himself. Including Ghost, although he does have some help, as you can call it help. It's kind of the opposite of help. The last duel I want to discuss when it comes to Vader's physical abilities is his final duel with Luke. Luke had grown much stronger and was able to match Vader's strength and surpass him in speed. Vader still has more skill, however. After running away for non-combative reasons, Luke finally attacks. He pushes Vader back with wild swings. Vader walks backward, shoulders hunched, before finally collapsing against the guardrail for no apparent reason. Luke proceeds to slam his blade down on Vader's blade several times before eventually simply knocking it to the side and striking Vader's hand instead. To be honest, the choreography of the scene is absolutely dreadful. Vader seems to no longer even be trying. He does not try to take the offensive much, his posture is weak, and he falls to the ground without a clear cause. Furthermore, Luke was fighting well up to this point. Then he suddenly starts swinging like a madman. He winds up behind his head, and he ends his strikes past his hip. He doesn't circle around to the next stack, but instead he just stops and completely reverses his momentum. This takes a lot more energy. This sequence here is pretty good. Luke keeps his lightsaber mostly in front of him, and Vader is no longer in a position where he can easily strike back. In conclusion, Vader is crazy strong and insanely tough. Despite being physically slow, he is literally faster than lightning reflexes, and his positioning allows him to deal with quicker opponents and leverage his strength. If I were to rate each physical characteristic on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give Vader a 10 on strength, Anakin would get a 9 or 10, Vader would get a 10 on toughness, Anakin would get an 8, Vader would get an 8 on skill, Anakin would only get a 7, Vader would get a 4 to 5 on speed, brought up significantly by his reflexes, while Anakin would get an 8. When it comes to physical abilities, I do favor Anakin, but it is a very slight edge, so it's basically just a tie. When it comes to the Force, there is no one with more potential than Anakin. Yet talent without training is nothing. Anakin trained for 10 years with his master before honing his skills during the Clone Wars. Despite focusing on his physical skills like piloting and lightsaber dueling, Anakin's feats with the Force were incredible. During the Mon Cala campaign, he uses the Force to collapse an entire building. It takes him a while, but this is perhaps the greatest feat of telekinesis ever seen. It takes an incredible amount of stability to survive the high pressure of the deep ocean, so that building would be incredibly tough. Yet Anakin is able to bring the whole thing down with the Force. Also during the Mon Cala campaign, he and Kit Fisto created a bubble of air around Padme's head because her helmet cracked. While holding back the pressure of the entire ocean above them, he and Master Fisto had to remain still or electric eels would shock them. After several seconds, Anakin is shocked and unable to maintain the force pressure, and it collapses. Regardless, these two feats solidify Anakin as an extremely powerful and dangerous Force user. And then in the book Thrawn Alliances, Anakin shows off his precision. He uses the Force to shut off the lights to a courtyard and move his lightsaber around to make it seem like a Jedi. Before that, he uses the Force to animate a corpse. These two feats demonstrate an incredible amount of precision and skill. In combat, however, Anakin never reaches his full potential. During the Clone Wars, Anakin duels Barriss Offee, who had fallen to the dark side. It is a pretty epic duel, but it ends when Anakin finally uses the Force. It was his first visible use of the Force in the duel, obviously not including things like Force augmentation and Force senses. But it was a very powerful use. He throws Barriss back into a tree and holds her there. Barriss is completely incapable of retaliation. Anakin had completely dominated her with the Force. He could have just used it earlier. During his first duel with Dooku on Naboo, he is surrounded by 4 Magna Guards. Unable to fight them off with his lightsaber, he resorts to the Force. He uses it to fling them across the room. At the very end, as all 4 are stabbing him with their staves, he launches all 4 of them back at once. However, despite all his uses of the Force, not a single one is destroyed by the Force. While this shows decent power and an amazing level of comfort with it, it is one of only a few instances of Anakin actually using the Force mid-combat. In his second duel with Dooku on Naboo, he uses the Force a single time. He knocks the second Magna Guard off balance an instant before slashing it to pieces with his lightsaber. Even when Dooku is hurling chairs and cutlery at him, Anakin resorts to holding his arm over his face before resorting to the Force. There are a few other examples, but for the most part, Anakin resorts to his lightsaber ahead of the Force. When Cad Bane and a team of bounty hunters rescued Zero the Hutt by holding a group of senators hostage, Anakin was the only one in the building to be free. But he did not have his lightsaber. He was hunted down by a weak-away pirate and an IG assassin droid. When the two split up, he attacked the IG unit. Despite being unarmed and in a tough situation, he did not resort to the Force. Instead, he used his physical combat skills. While all these examples demonstrate that Anakin is very powerful and very precise, he doesn't really use the Force that much. Vader lost most of his potential in his duel on Mustafar, but his lack of potential and the cruelty of his master drove him to work harder than he ever had as a Jedi. Although he was perhaps slightly less powerful than Anakin, the limitations of his suit forced him to rely more on his Force abilities instead of his physical abilities. In his duel with the Jedi Kanan Jarrus and Ezra Bridger on Lothal, he is able to fling both of them away with ease. Then he's able to nearly kill Ezra with his own blade. The real demonstration of his power, though, comes at the end of the fight. Sabine and Zeb throw some explosives at a pair of ATDP walkers. When they go off, the walkers collapse, With a perfectly timed force push, Ezra and Canon launch Vader backward right underneath the HEDPs. As Ezra and Canon turn to leave, they hear creaking metal. They turn back to see Vader holding both the HEDPs casually over his head with the Force. Later in Rebels, he has an amazing duel with his former apprentice, Ahsoka Tano. At first, she keeps him under too much pressure to do much but fend her off, but she quickly tires and he takes the upper hand. He pushes her back to the edge of the Sith Pyramid, which they are doing on, and he knocks her over the edge with a wave of his hand. During his mission to Ryloth, seen in the book Lords of the Sith, Vader brings down an entire ship with Force. Although I haven't read the comics personally, there are numerous incredible feats that I've discovered secondhand. For example, Vader uses the Force to rebuild his damaged suit out of spare droid parts, he uses the Force to keep an AT-AT from stepping on him, and he uses Force stasis on 2 Inquisitors at once. In his duel with Luke, he demonstrates the ability to use the Force without hand gestures, allowing him to maintain a blade walk with Luke while knocking him around with loose boxes and machinery. In his final duel with Luke, he demonstrates the lightsaber throwback. Vader has a wide variety of Force skills, and he uses them pretty frequently. Anakin is clearly more powerful. Lifting a pair of HEDPs is impressive, but it pales in comparison to crushing a giant tower. Granted, crushing the tower took far longer and seemed to be more difficult, but even still, Anakin has more raw power than Vader. However, Vader surpasses Anakin in every other aspect of Force combat. Vader demonstrates a wider variety of powers. He is far more likely to use the Force in combat. Even his precision and speed are superior, although only slightly. Vader has the edge in Force abilities. Anakin Skywalker has been described as a bold general numerous times, from hunting down Ventress during the Battle of Christophsis with Obi-Wan Kenobi, to taking out the Tactile droid at the Battle of Urbana. Anakin has won victory after victory through his bold tactics. Anakin's strategy in 1v1 duels is very similar. As seen in his countless duels with Dooku, he closes the distance to finish off his opponents, overwhelming them with his speed and power. He rarely retreats and rarely knocks his opponents back to create space. It is a basic strategy, but the simple plan is often the best plan. Anakin's strategy is backed up by his aggressive style. He uses a simple blend of Form 5 and Form 4. Form 4 is known for its acrobatics, non-weapon strikes, and its fluid stance. Anakin uses Form 5 primarily, but he will occasionally kick his opponents, and he is in a fairly mobile stance, unlike most Form 5 users. Form 5, on the other hand, is known for its stable stance, powerful counterattacks, and its aggressiveness. Due to his use of Form 4, Anakin's stance is not as rigid as other Form 5 users, but it is still a strong stance. He exemplifies the other two traits. Powerful counterattacks are the basis of his aggressive style. Theoretically, a Form 5 user will never be on the defensive. If an opponent strikes at them, they simply overpower the opponent's strikes with their own, instead of simply parrying or blocking the strike. In practice, Form 5 has the weakness for striking very slowly, and its strikes being predictable due to the greater windup. Darth Vader is a more cautious tactician. His strategies are still bold, but less reckless. In addition, he has learned to dominate the battle through fear. Nearly everyone he has fought, except for Ahsoka, Luke in Episode 6, and Tarkin, was terrified of Vader. Vader's dark suit, his deep voice, and his red lightsaber are terrifying, but the scariest part about battling him is that nothing seems to faze him. His mask doesn't betray any emotion. Up until his final duel with Luke, he doesn't appear to be straining at all. Vader appears unstoppable, and once you are convinced that your opponent is unstoppable, you have lost. One of the biggest parts of Vader's tactics is determination. He just refuses to give up. He has been through so much suffering that all he cares about is completing the next mission. In the comics, Tarkin and several personally hired hunters attempt to hunt down Vader. In the end, Tarkin lures Vader into a lightning storm, where the Dark Lord is struck. Yet even after that, Vader force chokes Tarkin to let him know that he still had not lost. Vader is also a practitioner of Form 5. Though his supplemental forms are more nuanced than Anakin's. To counter opponents that are faster than him, he implemented some elements of Form 2. We see this in his careful footwork and precise slashes that he used to box Ahsoka in Infinite Wrath. He also has taken some elements of Form 6. Despite relying primarily on Form 5, he remains versatile and able to adapt to anything. He incorporates force power smoothly into his saber strikes, he combines aggressive power strikes with stonewall defenses, and among other things. Despite the other forms, Vader is easily identifiable as a Form 5 user. His immense strength is perfectly suited for that style. He is able to easily overpower everyone he meets, until Luke in Episode 6, who seems to match him in strength. This means any attack he can block, he can transform into his own attack, simply by pushing hard and using Form 5 techniques. We see him do this repeatedly in all of his duels. Tactically, Anakin and Vader are very similar, which makes sense since they share the same mind. Vader is more reserved, while Anakin is more bold. The superior tactic depends on the situation. When you are the underdog, a more reserved strategy can win you the duel, but a bold strategy can catch your opponent off guard and give you the win as well. When you have the advantage, a bold strategy will often utterly dominate the opponent, giving them no chance to try anything, but a reserve strategy allows you to minimize your own mistakes, meaning they can't really take advantage of any of your mistakes. Tactically, they are evenly matched. As stated at the beginning of the video, the battlefield will be the arena where Zuko and Azula fought their last Agni Kai. The arena is a flat rectangle of packed earth with no loose objects. There is plenty of room, but not so much that retreat is an option. This simple terrain favors Anakin. Vader doesn't retreat often, but he does so more than Anakin. More importantly, the lack of loose objects means that one of Vader's staple strategies is no longer viable, unless he creates his own rumble. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the analysis, and let the algorithm know you like this type of video so you can see more like it, and in addition you can just subscribe to get these videos weekly. Vader wordlessly ignited his lightsaber. A young Jedi stood across from him, a blue lightsaber activated and held at the ready. They were in a rectangular arena of hard-packed earth. Ornate pillars and buildings surrounded the arena on all four sides. The man wore dark robes. He had a thin scar through his eye. His curly brown hair was nearly shoulder length. Vader thought he recognized him. No, he knew he should have recognized him, but that was a mystery for later. In the name of the Jedi and the Republic, you're under arrest, the man said confidently. I suggest you stand down. Vader did not speak. He merely strode forward. He held his lightsaber at his side. He projected an air of confidence and casualness, but in reality, he was a cold spring, ready to strike at the first sign of any real danger. Fine, you leave me no choice, the man said. Though to be honest, I'm not really surprised. I mean, look at your face. I bet you haven't cracked a smile in years. With that, the Jedi put on his own smile and leapt forward, bringing his lightsaber in a wide, predictable arc at Vader's left side. Vader easily brought his blade up, stepping forward as he did. The strength of the Jedi surprised him though, as he did the follow-up strike on Vader's right shoulder. Vader brought his blade up into a static block, and the man's lightsaber nearly broke through his guard. Vader countered with his own strike, which the Jedi neatly parried before launching into his own series of attacks. Vader quickly overpowered the strikes and forced the Jedi back, barely maintaining the offensive. The man twisted to Vader's right and swung an overhead blow. Vader stepped back, avoiding the strike before countering with an uppercut, but he underestimated the Jedi's speed and received a hard kick to the stomach that sent him reeling backward. The Jedi followed up with a swift series of strikes. Vader backpedaled a few steps before catching the Jedi with a force push, followed by a lightsaber throw. The Jedi recovered just in time to bat the lightsaber throw to the side. Vader circled his opponent. Clearly he was user of Form 5. He was aggressive and relied on his ability to keep the offensive, just like Vader. This battle would be determined by who was in control. Either Vader would crush his opponent, or he would be overwhelmed. Suddenly, the Jedi attacked. He ducked underneath the strike and landed a hard blow to Vader's shoulder. Vader yelled in pain and immediately retaliated with 3 aggressive strikes, culminating with a twist to disarm the young man. Unfortunately, the Jedi kept his grip on his lightsaber and was able to retake the offensive. Vader found himself falling back in a Form 3 style defense. Elbows in, lightsaber up, everything protecting the chest. His enemy's blade lingered a moment too long in the blade lock, and Vader pushed forward. He sensed the fatigue in his opponent and decided that it was now or never. Vader threw everything he had at his opponent. His lightsaber darted in and out, trying to push through his opponent's guard. He strode forward with each strike, pushing the Jedi back to the edge of the arena. With a sudden backhanded strike, Vader slammed the man into a pillar. It cracked visibly. The Jedi stood shakily to his feet. Vader flung the Jedi back underneath the overhanging with a force push. The Jedi slid backward and came to a stop, straining against Vader with his own force wall. Vader released his force push and was flung backward a few feet by the man's own force push. But before the Jedi moved, he reached out with the force and collapsed the entire building down around him. All too easy, Vader said to no one. The building crashed down around the Jedi, throwing up a cloud of dust. As the dust settled, the rubble shifted. A heap of broken tiles and rubble lifted from the collapsed building. Suddenly, it flew towards Vader. Vader thrust up a hand and parted the wave of projectiles. The Jedi had survived, but Vader was not done yet either. Vader and the Jedi clashed. The blue lightsaber was a blur of light, but Vader parried each strike with his crimson blade. He caught the Jedi in a blade lock and began pushing the Jedi back towards the rubble. The man set his feet and resisted, but Vader reached out with his mind and flung a pile of broken tiles toward the Jedi. With one hand, the Jedi blocked the tiles, but Vader quickly pushed through his one-handed guard and began a series of vicious strokes. He ended with a force push before knocking the Jedi to the ground. Before his adversary hit the ground, Vader had deactivated his lightsaber and was lifting up bits of rubble and sending them streaking towards the Jedi. The Jedi tried to defend himself, but he was battered by loose stones and cut by broken tiles. His lightsaber was knocked out of his hand, and he covered his face with his arm. With a yell, he let loose a powerful force repulse. Every piece of rubble was blasted at least 10 feet away. Vader slid backward a few feet and threw up his arms to block several pieces of shrapnel. Vader looked up just in time to see the Jedi leaping toward him. Suddenly, Vader saw his chance. As the blue lightsaber arced downward, Vader stepped forward, igniting his lightsaber. The Jedi's strike hit Vader solidly in the shoulder, penetrating through his massive pauldrons and burning his skin. But Vader had gone for the kill. His lightsaber had plunged itself into the Jedi's stomach. The Jedi's eyes widened in surprise and pain before he collapsed to the ground. Suddenly, Vader recognized him. It was his former self, Anakin Skywalker, the man who had failed Padme. So you are not as weak as I presumed, Vader said to himself. Yet, like all Jedi, you were blinded by arrogance, and so I destroyed you. Vader lost great potential when he burned on Mustafar, but what he lost in potential, he made up for with determination and focus. Anakin was confident. Instead of diligently practicing, he sought to prove to his masters that he was as powerful as he claimed to be. This arrogance is what held him back, and the only cure was the humiliation he suffered on Mustafar. The same duel that cost him so much is what made him the cold, calculating monster that he was. It's a very close battle, but because of the similar styles, it's also a consistent one. Despite being a closer match than most battles, I think Vader would win 70% of the time. Now, I want to thank you for listening to all my thoughts on Anakin versus Vader. I know it's a long video, but thanks for sticking through it. Make sure to leave a comment. Here are a few topic suggestions. What types of terrain do you think would benefit each combatant the most? Personally, I think Anakin would do best in a tight space with nothing in it for Vader to throw around. For example, the reactor pit, where Qui-Gon was fatally wounded by Darth Maul. On the other hand, I think Vader would do best in a more chaotic environment where he can manipulate the environment to his advantage. Something like the Force Moon of Endor or the Droid Factory in Geonosis. Another question you could answer is simply what your verdict would be for this fight. Do you agree that Vader would win? Do you think he would win more often or less often? And most importantly, why? So what feats do you think I overestimated or underestimated? What feats did I miss? Was there anything I took out of context or you don't know the source material for? The last few topics I'll suggest are duels you'd like to see in the future, other types of content I can make, and suggestions for how I can improve my scripting, recording, and editing. Now, I'm not making any promises that I'll use 100% of your ideas, but I am inviting you to let me know your thoughts. One quick note about suggestions, I'm not well versed enough in Legends content to delve into topics about it. I get a lot of suggestions and comments telling me about this character or that feat from Legends, and I just don't really have enough experience with Legends to cover those topics. So, with all of that said, thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you.